The wind had been howling since dusk, a sharp, merciless sound that sliced through the wide Wyoming plains like a blade. Snow came down sideways, stinging anything exposed to it, and the moon was nothing more than a pale blur behind thick clouds. Inside a lone ranch house miles from the nearest town, Ethan Cole stirred from a half-sleep in his wooden chair by the stove. He was a cowboy in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, weathered by years of sun, dust, and loss. Winters were nothing new to him, but something about this night felt heavier, more urgent, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Then he heard it. A sound that did not belong to the storm. It was faint at first, almost lost between the gusts of wind, but it repeated low, strained, and unmistakably alive. Ethan straightened, heart quickening. He grabbed his coat, pushed his feet into his boots, and reached for the lantern by the door. The sound came again, closer now. Not a howl, not a bark. A bray. Donkeys. No one in their right mind would be out with animals on a night like this. Ethan pulled the door open, and icy air exploded into the cabin, instantly stealing his breath. Snow rushed inside, skidding across the floorboards. He raised the lantern, its yellow glow cutting a small tunnel through the storm, and that was when he saw them. 3 donkeys stood just beyond the porch. They were huddled close together, backs dusted white with snow, ears drooping under the weight of ice. Their legs trembled, not from stubbornness, but from cold and exhaustion. One was large and gray, another smaller and brown, and between them stood a white donkey with dark, intelligent eyes. Steam rose from their nostrils as they breathed, and one let out another weak bray, almost a plea. Ethan cursed under his breath. "Where in God's name did you come from?" he muttered. There was no wagon, no rider, no tracks except the confused, half-buried prints behind them. They looked like they had walked for miles through the storm, guided by nothing but instinct and desperation. He didn't hesitate. All right, he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You're safe now." He waved the lantern, stepped back, and opened the door wider. The donkeys hesitated, ears flicking, eyes wary. Ethan knew animals well enough to understand fear. He moved slowly, speaking softly, until the gray donkey took a tentative step onto the porch. The others followed. One by one, the 3 donkeys crossed the threshold and entered the warmth of his home. The moment the door shut behind them, the change was immediate. The wind was cut off, and the quiet inside the cabin felt almost sacred. The donkeys stood awkwardly on the wooden floor, hooves clicking softly. Ethan hung his lantern on a hook and finally saw them clearly. That was when he noticed the packs. Each donkey carried a heavy canvas bundle strapped securely across its back. The fabric was old but well-maintained, reinforced at the corners, tied with thick leather straps. These were not random loads. They were carefully prepared. Ethan frowned. He approached slowly, starting with the gray donkey, resting a hand on its neck. The animal flinched at first, then relaxed as he rubbed warmth back into its frozen skin. He could feel how thin it was beneath the coat, how tired. "Easy," he murmured. "You've been carrying a burden, haven't you?" He glanced again at the packs, his curiosity growing into concern. In all his years on the plains, he had seen supply donkeys, mining donkeys, even pack animals used by traveling preachers and doctors. But never 3 donkeys alone in a blizzard, knocking on a man's door like they knew exactly where to go. He fetched blankets, draping them carefully over each animal, then brought water and a bucket of oats. The donkeys ate slowly, gratefully, as if every movement cost them strength. Only after they were settled did Ethan turn his attention back to what they carried. His instincts told him to be cautious. He unbuckled the straps on the gray donkey first. The canvas pack thudded onto the floor, heavier than he expected. He untied the knot, folded the fabric back, and froze. Inside were blankets. Dozens of them. Thick wool blankets, neatly folded, some patched, some new, all clean. Beneath them were coats, scarves, gloves, and wool socks. Supplies meant for warmth. Survival. Ethan's throat tightened. He moved to the second donkey, the brown one, and opened its pack. This one held food: dried meat, sacks of beans, flour, sugar, tins of coffee, and small jars of preserved fruit. Everything carefully wrapped to keep dry. The third pack, on the white donkey, was the heaviest. Ethan hesitated before opening it. When he finally did, his breath caught in his chest. Inside were letters. Hundreds of them. They were tied in bundles with twine, sorted by names written in different hands. On top lay a leather-bound journal and a folded piece of paper addressed simply to whoever finds them. Ethan swallowed hard and picked up the note. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. If you are reading this, then I may already be gone. These donkeys were trained to seek shelter and people when the storm became too strong. They carry what I could no longer deliver myself. Please do not turn them away. These supplies are meant for the families scattered across the valley: widows, children, the sick, and the forgotten. The letters belong to them. They are words of love, forgiveness, and goodbye. If you have the strength, finish what I could not. There was no name. Ethan lowered himself into a chair, the note trembling in his hand. Outside, the storm continued its fury, unaware that something extraordinary had just crossed the threshold of his life. He picked up the journal next. The pages told the story. The writer was an old man named Samuel Hart, a former schoolteacher who had spent the last years of his life traveling between remote homesteads, delivering letters for those who could not read or write, carrying news between families separated by miles of harsh land. When winter came, he had stayed with the sick, taught children by lantern light, and made promises he intended to keep. But the journal entries grew weaker toward the end. Samuel had fallen ill, trapped by the early storms. Knowing he might not survive, he trained his donkeys, his faithful companions, to follow the trail toward Ethan's ranch, the only place with light visible for miles on clear nights. He packed them with everything he had prepared for others, trusting that someone would understand. Ethan closed the journal, eyes burning. He was not a man who cried easily, but something about the quiet faith placed in strangers broke him open. A dying man had trusted the world enough to send his final mission forward on the backs of 3 animals. And now that mission had landed at Ethan's door. The next morning, the storm eased. The sky cleared into a cold, hard blue, and the land sparkled under fresh snow. Ethan woke early, his mind already made up. He saddled his horse, loaded a sled with supplies from the donkey packs, and began the long work Samuel could not finish. Day by day, he traveled across the valley, guided by the letters. He knocked on doors where hope had long gone quiet. He delivered coats to children who had outgrown last winters. He brought food to mothers who had been rationing their last sacks of flour. He read letters aloud to old men with failing eyes and to women who clutched the words like lifelines. Some letters were joyful. Some were apologies. Some were final goodbyes from sons who never came home. And everywhere he went, people asked the same question. Who sent you? Ethan always answered the same way. A friend. The 3 donkeys traveled with him, steady and patient, becoming known across the valley as if they were something more than animals. Children laughed when they saw them. Adults crossed themselves in quiet gratitude. Word spread, and kindness followed. By spring, the valley felt different. Warmer, not in weather, but in spirit. When the last letter was delivered, Ethan returned home and released the donkeys into his pasture. They stayed. As if they had chosen him. Years later, when people spoke of the winter that nearly broke them, they did not talk first about the cold or the hunger. They talked about the night a cowboy opened his door to 3 freezing donkeys and how what they carried changed everything.